And I commented how yesterday President Putin, he announced the call up. They aim to call up 300,000. It's important to say aim. So even they, I think, are tacitly admitting they won't get 300,000. The Russian government will fall short of its target. It always does. So maybe they'll get a 250,000. And they're not going to be coming today. The first call up notices have already gone out. And they're meant to be to young men who've already finished their compulsory military service, calling them back largely in their 20s. Men have a 2 week refresher course, which I'm told is not adequate to get people's military skills back up to speed. And of course, if you left several years ago, technology may have moved on, doctrine may have changed. So no doubt they will be rushed through training in a half-assed way, sent to the battlefront. Because, Russia's lost up to 100,000 troops already. Only maybe a quarter of those are killed, some captured, some wounded, some deserted, and others are just missing. And Ukraine's casualties have been heavy as well. And notably, then Russia actually released its first death toll figure since March, admitting over 5,000 of its soldiers have been killed. And now, of course, that'll be a lie, as they lie about absolutely everything, even when we can prove with 100% certainty that it's a lie. So presumably it's appreciably higher than that. NATO estimates it's more like 20,000 Russians killed. And people are always saying, oh, well, they lost, only 14,000 in Afghanistan. That was the Soviet Union, not the Russian Federation. Russia's only half the population of the quantum USSR. Moreover, 14,000, that was the Soviet government's own figure, which again will have been a lie. It could be twofold higher, or it could be tenfold. I don't know. But one thing I bet the bank on is it was higher. So this has not gone down well, this military call-up. And Putin says, they've got 25 million military-age males not currently engaged, as in, so men aged 19 to 40. So they could call up a lot more. And obviously some people are exempted for because they're permanently medically unfit, or they're already in the security services of the police, and so on. And, so his mate, Prigozhin, Yevgeny Prigozhin's recruiting for prisons. That's how desperate they are. So they're in fairly dire straits. And I don't think Russia's about to lose the war, but morale is pretty low, they're poorly led, and so on. And they opened a recruitment center for foreigners in Moscow because not enough Russians are coming forward. They're Tajik and Kyrgyz people, Uzbeks, to whom this might be quite attractive. They don't have very much money. But these countries have all said, no, if you join the Russian army, you'll get years in prison when you come home. And these people from former Soviet countries, Kazakhstan, well, Kazakh rarely moved to Russia, but Kyrgyzstan, and from Tajikistan, Uzbekistan. These are quite impoverished countries run by pro-Russian kleptocrats. So being a Russian citizen is attractive to them, and they're told that'll speed up the process. It normally takes about 10 years to become a Russian citizen, is labyrinthine in its complexity. So Putin, he was fairly liked, and, morality aside, he delivered for Russia. In the first 10 years or so, life got better in just about every way, and there was less corruption. You're going to be corrupt if you're really a big boy. The low-level things, the police can be shaking you down. He was also feared, but he ruled through fear. He thinks that fear is respect, but it was some carrot as well as stick. Salaries went up, people got paid on time, there was less violent crime, you weren't being shaken down for bribes by the police, pensions were increased, there were infrastructure projects, there was a general clean-up. He was very lucky with oil and gas prices as well. So there's no question that he was popular. There were some foreign policy successes, like the Winter Olympics, like the Football World Cup, and they're never going to get that again. UEFA's banned them. Anyway, so tens of thousands of men have fled already. Flights to places like Yerevan, Istanbul, Baku, where they've sold out. So people are going to Georgia, over the land border to Finland, and the Finns said it might stop almost all Russians coming in. So over 1,400 Russians have already been arrested for protesting. So this is why Putin really didn't want to do it. He's doing this because he absolutely had to. Remember, he vowed at the beginning of the war that no conscript would ever be sent to fight in Ukraine. Lie, that one was broken within days, as even he himself acknowledged. Thank you. So he knows this is unpopular. So there's this sort of silent majority willing to tolerate the war so long as it doesn't impact their lives too much. And sort of the Moscow elite, who are Putin's sycophants, many of them, yeah, they might well be cheerleaders for this war, but they're not having their boy sent to be killed in Ukraine. It's okay if you conscript the working class, the ethnic minorities, people from who are country bumpkins, but not well-heeled Muscovites. So some protesters have been given draft papers. So anyway, the Russian government claims that 10,000 Russians have volunteered within the first 24 hours. Well, I very much doubt that, but there might have been a few volunteers. Anyway, and so Putin made these blood-curdling threats of a nuclear Armageddon, and we know that things are going badly for him when he's reduced to that. It's because the conventional war is going badly, which doesn't guarantee that they will lose. I think there's a sort of too much optimism in the West, because there was that Ukrainian counteroffensive around Kharkiv, which did quite well, but it seems to run out of steam. They overstretched their supply lines. Russian resistance has stiffened, so they're not going to regain that much land that quickly. Another thing is Putin is recognizing the energy situation is not as grave for European Union countries as he had been led to believe, or indeed was forecast, and inflation is going down. So yes, this winter is going to be tough for the European Union, but not enough to break it. So he thought the time was on its side, and actually that might not be the case. It seems that he might want to escalate, to de-escalate, to ramp up the rhetoric, and to call up more troops. At the same time, he's offered a concession. So he released 10 Western prisoners of war who've been captured by the pro-Russian militias and sentenced to death by one of these so-called People's Republics. But they've been released partly by the mediation of the Saudi Arabians, so they're coming home now. And a prisoner exchange of something like 200 Ukrainian prisoners of war released in return of about 55 Russians, and indeed Medvedchuk. Medvedchuk is a pro-Moscow Ukrainian, and indeed Putin is the stepfather, sorry, is the father, what do you call it? Godfather of Medvedchuk's daughter. So he thinks that he has to saber rattle on nuclear weapons, frighten us, and then we'll back down. He'll get some sort of concession. Even he recognised he can't win the war outright. He's not going to say that publicly, of course, but could he get something? Could he get Luhansk? Could he get Donetsk? Could he get a promise that Ukraine will never join NATO? Even if Russia doesn't officially get Donetsk and Luhansk, could the West recognise it as an independent country? Could have some sort of anomalous status, things like that. Video on Rudolf Nureyev. Okay, well, I don't know a great deal about ballet dancers. And, there might be this cultural boycott on Russia, not allowing them, ballet dancers and so on, to go ahead. Is that a good thing or bad thing? Well, I think maybe debate that in a different video. China has publicly expressed its disquiet about the war and wanted to be ended by negotiation. If he's lost China, well, he's really lost something vital, because they do so much of their trade with China. If China stopped buying their energy, the war would end tomorrow. But China needs that energy. Nobody else is going to supply them. It's not that much oil and gas that cheap. And frankly, the Chinese could just take some of Russia. They could just cross the Amur River in Siberia, which was Chinese till the late 19th century anyway, and reclaim it. Because obviously the Russian Far East is sort of denuded of soldiers. There's one of the longest land borders in the world, and there's just no way that Russia can defend that against the Chinese when they're outnumbered 10 to 1. And I'm surprised the Chinese don't do this. So many Ukrainians are given credible accounts of being severely tortured in Russian captivity. I think it's unfalsifiable. I'm not certain it's true, but I think it's very highly probable indeed. So many young men are trying to get out of Russia now before they're called up. I know there was a secret clause to this announcement, that this one's not yet been publicized. What does it say? And the speculation is that this just endlessly widens it, that he can call up anybody else, whenever he wants. And they haven't even called it a war yet. So there's this general mobilization. But these 300,000, say they get 250,000, it's going to be several months before they're all in the field. That might not be enough to even replace them at the rate they're losing them. Probably will be enough to replace them, though. And it's going to be difficult for Russia to arm, equip, supply, resupply, transport that many troops. And remember, they have to go longer distances. They're not all right from the border with Ukraine, some of them from eastern Siberia. Now, Ukraine's got problems as well, but they're just not dealing with such long distances. And they're being funded and armed by other countries. I've often been bitterly disappointed that NATO countries haven't taken bigger risks and given them heavier weapons. So anyway, Putin and his colleague Dmitry Medvedev, so if you threaten Russian integrity, we'll nuke Germany and the United Kingdom. But wait a second, nobody's talking about threatening Russia's territorial integrity. Russia is trying to threaten Ukraine's territorial integrity, take the whole of it, attempting the erasure of Ukraine as a sovereign nation. So yeah, again, this is projection. This is the pot called the kettle black. Why does he have to up the ante, suggest that the West is trying to invade Russia? Really, he thinks the only way he can drum up support for this war is going fairly badly for him. But yeah, I mean, could still win. So we just really need to redouble support. to trying to get people to desert, and Germany say they would welcome those who desert from the army, and a few have already. So some of these Western countries are saying we're not going to give visas to Russian men, but maybe that's exactly what we should be doing, because then they can't be conscripted into the army. The trouble is we don't know which ones are secret agents. All right, so Putin was sort of caught between a rock and a hard place. There was the liberal anti-war people, and then the war hawks who accused him of not doing enough, had been excoriating, not him personally, but everyone else in the top brass, for just not showing total commitment to this war. But these men themselves, notably, didn't volunteer, or I doubt, encourage their sons to do so. Well, thank you so much for watching, so please subscribe on Patreon, follow me on all sorts of social media, donate on PayPal, georgecallahan79@gmail.com. Goodbye.